Today's webinar is going to cover the basic features of SMMware, but we're also going to be previewing a new feature that we're going to be launching in about a week for supporting multiple pay levels for individual employees. We're going to start off by talking about the clients, leads, jobs within SMMware, what it's like to enter hours and expenses and creating invoices, and also files, uploading and sharing. And somewhere in there around the recording of hours, we'll start talking about the multiple pay levels. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get going. Here we are on the home page for SMMware. And if someone should contact you with a sales opportunity, the first thing you want to do is create a quick client record. You only need the first name and the last name, and once you do that, so I'm going to create a duplicate client name. So I had to change a little bit. And once you've created the client profile, you can go ahead and create a sales opportunity. Here you can indicate what kind of work you think is going to be done and who on your sales team is going to handle it. It's going to be the salesperson. And you can indicate various status levels. The different status levels are customizable. So this particular setup has inquiry, prospecting, these others, but you can have different ones if you like. Start with in progress. The sales profile is a place for storing information about the sales opportunity that is separate from a quote. The quote, of course, is a document showing what you're going to do and how much it's going to cost. But you may also want to take some notes. You may want to upload some files. This is an area where we can indicate their new address. And the drop-down you're looking at allows you to select from places that you work with on a regular basis, say a senior living center. And that way the address is filled in for you except for the apartment or suite number. Our profile does include some custom fields, and we actually have up to 28 of them. And we hide the ones that were not currently in use, just to keep things clean. Go ahead and take down that poll about the primary of interest now. And once we've created a sales profile, maybe we've taken some notes down here in this area. Maybe uploaded some files. Maybe we want to create a quote. You can generate templates within SMMware so that you can use that as a starting point. Oops, I want to load from a template. And that way it gets you a jump start on creating your sales quote. So you can see here that it comes with the hourly rate and various blocks within the quote. Creating a quote within SMMware is a question of mixing and matching the blocks that we provide you, the different block types. This one is a client block, and it would include the address and phone if we had entered that information. And this is a header block. And this is a group block, which is a way of putting together different line items under one subheader. Down below, we have a large text block. We have a summary block. And then finally, our legal block. And these are all brought in from the template, but we can modify it however we like to. Anything that is not in gray is something that you can click on and start modifying, which includes the legal language. Save that. Once we have saved our quote, we can go ahead and view it as a PDF. So this is what your client would actually see. It does have, you would have your own header, not to this generic one. And we can also, if I had entered an email address, we can email a copy of the quote to the client as a PDF attachment to that email. And if we win the work, we can create a job right from here. Also, I was going to mention that as we're going along, if anybody has any questions, feel free to throw them in the chat area or the question and answer section. I'll keep an eye on that as we go and answer questions as I see them. And if you suppose that somebody contacts you and says that your first quote was looking pretty good, but they actually can do a little more and they want to add maybe a storage room, something like that, you can come back to this quote and copy it. So we're not going to overwrite the quote we already created. We're creating a new copy. This section, this block is called the quote version notes. And this is where you can write yourself a note about how this is different from the last quote. This is not part of the PDF that the client sees. This is just a note that you write to yourself so that if you have 3 or 4 versions and you're looking at this 6 months down the line, that you will understand exactly why you created the various quote types. Before we look at jobs, I'd like to jump back to the client profile. I'm going to use the shortcut button right here. SMMware does have various shortcuts throughout that are meant to save you a little bit of time. So instead of going back to the client listing, then we can just jump right over to the client's profile. We have some fields here that might be of interest to you. If a client is not able to represent themselves, maybe it's an estate situation, then if it's a client representative that you've worked with before, they might be part of this drop-down, like say an attorney who has power of attorney. And you can indicate the relationship here. Or it might be a family member who's less likely to be in the system already. And you can add them from here using that plus sign. And I would fill out all their information. And when I said save, it would take us back to the screen. Another field, that's a set of fields here, is about the referral, who referred this business to you. We've got a category field, which is meant to be the highest level. And it could be anything from something like an industry, like real estate, or it could be something like from the website, your corporate website, or an ad campaign. The company could be something like the name of the real estate company where the referral came from. And of course, the person is obvious. That's the person who referred the business to you. This information ties into our referral report. And between the information provided here and the reporting, you'll have a good sense of where your business is coming from. Are you getting it from the director of marketing at various senior living centers? Are you getting it from real estate agents and so on? Here under the client profile, we've got some custom fields, and they tend to relate to the client as a person, things that don't change when they move from place to place. So it could be mobility issues, who their pets are, when their birthday is, things like that. Under the sales lead and the jobs, those custom fields are going to relate to things that do change as you move from one place to the other. And it could be elevator codes, which day the garbage comes, things like that. Okay, we're going to take a look at go ahead and create a job. I can indicate the team lead. I can indicate the hourly rate. If I created this directly from the sales quote, a lot of that information would have come over, but I did create this just directly. And again, we can pre-fill the address if it's a senior living center that we work with on a regular basis. We can also indicate if we charge this client the same hourly rate for all the hours, which is a per job rate, or we can use job codes, which is a way of indicating that there's going to be a different rate depending on the kind of work being done. Just going to upload a couple of files. I think I'll upload it in the regular file manager. We have 2 file managers. Rather than going on a file-by-file basis and saying this one's private, this one's public, and I mean public in the sense of letting other associates see it as opposed to admins, we have a section called Restricted File Manager, and we have a regular file manager. So that way it's pretty clear that this or that file is either going to be visible by everybody in the company or if it's just visible for admins. I'm going to take a look at some files to upload. You'll notice that these have the long random strings that you see coming from phones. And I'll talk about that more in just a second. And you'll notice that I multi-select. You can also multi-select when you upload from a phone or a tablet. So I selected 5 files, and I'm going to assign a tag, which is meant to be the room that you took the photos in. But these tags are also customizable, so if you want to use a different scheme, you certainly can. I've seen people set up a scheme where they have a before and after. They have a category or a tag for donating or items that are to be donated, things like that. And we'll see more of that in the settings editor in a little bit. I mentioned before about the file names having the long random strings, and we're going to fix that right now. I'm going to say auto rename, and it's going to combine the bedroom tag with a sequential file name. I'll go ahead and finish the upload so you can see that. And I said bedroom 1, so these files are going to come through as bedroom 1, and you'll notice they are bedroom 1, 001, 002, 3, 4, 5. Also, while we're here, you can enter a note, something like items that are going to be donated. And allows you to add a little bit more information to those photos. And we have various other functions. You can rotate it, rename it, or change the tags. You can click on it and then start cycling through all the photos in that folder. You can also share the folder or share the file. Since SMMware already knows who the client is, it's really just a question of saying, yeah, I'd like to share it with them. And if you want to share it with, say, a contact in the system like a mover, you would just pick them here. And when I hit save, then the notification will go out at that time. From here, I'd like to start talking about the entry of hours and touching on the idea of the payroll, multiple levels of pay. I'm going to go into look at I think we should start off in the system pay levels. So we're going into the settings editor, which is under admin, and then settings. And we're looking at the pay levels section. And here are the pay levels that I have defined generally. These are system-wide. So when we work with the various associates, this is going to be your list of choices. If it's not here, then it would not be a choice when you're looking at the associate. So I kept it simple. I have team member, and then a rate for a team member on the weekend, team lead, and then team lead on the weekend. And you'll notice that there's not a dollar amount here because this is really just a label. And we'll talk about why that is in the setup in a little bit. But those are our levels: team member, regular and weekend, team lead, regular and weekend. So from here, we're going to go look at an associate. Oops. Here we are. And we'll look at John's profile. And this is our section for pay levels right here. And John has all of the different pay levels assigned: team member weekend. And here's where we actually see the rates. And you can indicate that one of these rates is typically for a weekend, or team lead for the weekend. SMMware does not understand that a rate is for a weekend just because it's part of the label. That's not the sort of thing that computers would know. While looking at the associate profile, I'll just point out that we've got the usual information here, the name and address and phone. We've got some custom fields, which in this case are configured for emergency contact information. We also have various privileges, so you can let them have access to the sales leads and so on, the calendar, looking with the organizations and contacts section, maybe managing that, and looking at jobs and various other permissions. And of course, their username and their password. It's all set up through here. Right now, we're kind of focusing on the pay level idea, so I'm going to continue along those lines. And we will go ahead and look at the recording of hours and miles. To record hours, you first start with a date. And you can pick the client or the job. And in this case, this job does not use the job codes, and because I'm a high-level user, I get to pick the pay level directly. And these are a list of pay levels that apply to John, the associate we're working with. And if he did not have all these pay levels assigned, then they wouldn't all be available here. I'm going to enter the start and end time. And SMMware is warning me that I have overlapped with some other time. Let's scoot this out to something later. So SMMware does keep an eye on that so as to prevent duplicate entries. And we do want to enter some sort of description. And we also have the option of marking this as billable or not. We also have the option of making multiple entries at one time if we like, so that if we worked on one job in the morning and one in the afternoon, we can go ahead and enter that information all in one go. Go ahead and save that. Coming back to our main screen, I'll point out that the top section is where you can make new entries, and the bottom section is where you can modify and delete existing entries. In this case, we have the approval system turned on, and once something is approved, then you won't be able to delete it unless you unapprove it. If it's part of an invoice, then it would also be something that you cannot delete as long as it's part of that invoice, which makes sense. You don't want to delete the information from the system, then your invoice no longer makes sense. The entry of the expenses works in a similar way. In this case, we're entering the date, the job, the amount of money, who the vendor was, and we'll also put in a description here. We can also indicate that this is billable or not. We can upload a receipt, and we can indicate whether this expense was put on the company's credit card or if the employee paid for it out of pocket and then would need to be reimbursed with this radio button right here. Before we stray too far from the entry of hours, I'll go take a look at payroll report real quick. The typical usage of the payroll report would be to put in the date range for your payroll period and then just list out all the records. In this case, I'm going to limit the output to a specific job. I was looking for one where I've put in some data so that as to show you properly what I'm looking to find. For Karina, the employees, well, by default, I would say that it's not necessarily default. When you set up the associate profile, you can choose to let them see the clients or not. So you can limit the visibility so that only the, well, it's not on a per client basis. So you either have the ability to see the clients or not. It's not for jobs that you're assigned to. But you'll still have the ability to see the events and enter your hours for those jobs. We'll take a look at the payroll, and we can see some of the details, what the pay level was and what the resulting pay rate is. And then at the bottom, we've got the pay level summary. So if you're using a third-party payroll service, for a given pay level, you see how many hours and that were put in under that pay rate. And then there are occasions where some of the hours may wind up under a different rate, specifically when you give somebody a raise and you kind of have to make sure that it starts applying at the end of a payroll period. That's where you might see that. So that would appear here, some noting about how many hours are at different rates and what those rates were. And then the general totals for this associate. And then it just repeats for all the various associates that have entries under that. Next section I'd like to show you is the flat fees history. the flat fees entry rather. And a flat fee is when you're going to be charging the client, but it's not related to a number of hours and a rate. It's just a certain amount of money. And this could apply when it's a administrative fee. And when you predefine one of these flat fees, it includes the description and the fees, but you can modify the fees if you need to in any given circumstance. From here, I'll move on to the invoicing. SMMware does allow you to generate invoices that can be sent to the client. And we'll take a look at this one. We have different status levels. This one is team leader approved already. I'm going to actually roll this back to a lower status level. The various levels are the preliminary, which is intended to indicate to everybody in the company that this is a kind of a scratch pad where you don't expect it to be sent off to the client. We also have a system for the team leads to approve invoices. And the underlying thinking is that because they were there on site, they know which employees were there and what kind of work was done. They're in the best position to approve that. So when an invoice is ready for the team leads to approve, you say that it's finalized. And then on their homepage, they have a section where they can see the invoices that they need to approve. I'm going to roll this back to this lower status level from the team leader approved. And you can see where there's a button here, scan for line items, and that tells SMMware to go out into the system, look for any hours, expenses, flat fees, and so on that belong under this invoice. You can also modify the descriptions for those line items. Sometimes the associates are not clear when they write their descriptions as they enter their hours and expenses, and this is your chance to kind of clean that up. We also have a note that does appear on the invoice and another that does not. This is a place where you can say, thank you for your business and so on. And when I am ready, I can switch this to team leader approved. And instead of scanning for line items, this assumption is that it's kind of locked in. You don't expect to make more changes. And now I've got some buttons to show me the PDF versions for these. When you look at the web version, you can kind of consider that to be the quote-unquote true version of the invoice, but we have different ways of presenting that information. First, we'll start off with the summary invoice. And this is about as simple as it's going to get. It's only got a couple of line items that sum up the major categories. And you might choose this if you have a client who, when they see more detail, they tend to push back at every little thing. The next version we have is called the detailed invoice. Now this shows you every line item in the system, in the invoice. And sometimes this gets to be rather long if the project maybe lasts a couple of months. And that might actually start to look like too much detail. And in that case, we offer a third version, which is called the roll-up invoice. And it's called that because the line items for a given day get rolled up into one entry. So if you had a day where 4 or 5 people worked under the number of associates, it would say, 4 or 5, and it would take the service description from the team lead. And from there, it would have the total hours and the grand total of those hours and those rates. So again, this is the roll-up version. And it is meant to be kind of a middle ground between the summary and the detailed versions. So that brings us to the end of our first track. We've talked about clients and sales leads. We've talked about jobs. We've looked at entering hours and expenses, creating invoices. And along the way, we talked about file uploading. And we talked about the multiple pay level approach. So now we'll talk about the organizations and contacts section within SMMware. Here we are in the main menu, and we've got organizations, which is intended to be, say, like a real estate firm, real estate company. And then the people who work at that company fall under the contacts. When you first come to the listing page, you'll see that they have various categories that they fall under. So if you just want to see your real estate agents, you can just pop that open. Just going to take a look at the detail. It's pretty much what you would expect in terms of the organization's name and address and phone number, website. Here's where you can set what category they appear in, and you can have them appear in more than one. Sometimes people don't agree. Let's say you have two co-founders for the company, and they might disagree on which category something belongs in. And the good news is they can appear in both. And it's still just the one record. So when you edit the record, it's just there's no worry about having two records that get out of sync. And the contacts for this organization appear down at this section. I can create a new contact here. I can jump over to edit the existing contact. If this is a contact that refers business to you, you'll want to have this checkbox marked. And that way that plays into some other aspects of SMMware that we'll talk about soon. And if they are able to act as a client rep, that might be, say, an attorney again. You might want to mark them there as well for this checkbox. And I'd like to point out that we can upload files and assign tasks, create notes. We can do these things for various places. We're going to look at those in detail soon, but right now I just wanted to point out you can create those entities here under the contact. I'm going to jump back to the organization using the shortcut button. So now I'm back on the organization's record, and you'll see that you can upload files. You can create tasks and write notes here as well. So you can keep a running history of your interactions with this organization here under the notes section. You can create tasks for yourself, saying to follow up with them in 2 months, things like that. And under the file manager, perhaps you would like to upload a PDF containing their standard floor plans or something like that. Maybe some photos from the Senior Living Center. And I'd like to point out the search function that we offer. Instead of using the main navigation and going to a given section and then doing a search, and then visually scanning through a list to find the record you want to work with, you can just do a search and come up with a result that way. The search results are divided up so that you can tell that this Smith is a client, that Smith is a organization or a contact at an organization, so that you're not confusing your contacts with your clients. The organization's contacts section is our shortest, so we're already done with that and moving on. So now we're going to talk about the tasks, notes, and calls and the calendar functionality within SMMware. Let me go back to a job. Scrolling down to the bottom, we have a section for tasks. We'll go ahead and create a new task. Before I do, I'm going to point out that the tasks will have, this is the detailed list, the task will have their date and time in red if they're running late. So that will point it out to you. Go ahead and create a new task now. And I'll give it a due date and time. I can set a reminder email here as well and give it a priority. The status presumably would start off here at not started. And of course, we've got started and finished and waiting and date completed. You can assign it to somebody. And you can write a short summary, 1 line. A longer description. And then here is our new task that we just created. And after you've worked with the tasks in SMMware for a while, you might start to notice that a lot of them are the same. And you'll wonder if there's a way to manage these tasks en masse. And the answer is yes. We have something called task groups. And I'll look at the one for packing. When you add a task group, it actually consists of multiple tasks. And you can have the descriptions and the summary. A lot of this information is pre-configured. You can modify it. It's more like a cookie cutter situation where you're giving something as a starting point and then you can change it as needed. And it can be pre-assigned to somebody. So for instance, if you have somebody who specializes in floor plans and you have a floor plan task, then why not have it already show up as being assigned to the floor planning person? SMMware will take a guess at the due date, but you'll probably want to tweak that. It's usually, you're going to configure SMMware to jump out for 1 week or 2 weeks, something like that. And right now there are 3 tasks that I'm about to create, but maybe there's one of these that's not needed. And I'll just go ahead and get rid of the inventory list. And this approach generally is good for consistency insofar as you're going to start off with a list of all the standard tasks and you're going to remove the ones that don't apply, which is easier than trying to remember all these tasks and add them one at a time, working from your memory. It is also going to help you with consistency in that the language will start off the same. And like I said, you can modify it as needed, but you'll definitely have a good starting point with the same language. From here, I'll look at the notes section. Go ahead and create a new note. These are simpler than the tasks. They just have a summary. You can have some text that is filled into the field if you like, and then you can overwrite it if it doesn't apply. In this case, you can just erase it out of there. But in this case, this text is meant to let you describe a daily report. So it's got a description of the work completed. And this is probably a little bit higher level than individual descriptions entered under the hours. It's more general, implying to the day as a whole. And everything that's in here, these various categories, is something that you can configure in the settings editor as well. Coming back to our list of notes, you can see that the person who created the note is noted and the date it was created. And you can see all these notes at once. There's a button here for that. This way you can scan it quickly and see all the notes rather than having to open up each note in order to see the detail. Take a quick look at our calls section. It's a lot like the tasks, except that there's a phone number involved. You're going to care about whether you're calling them or they're calling you. And the call date. You can use this for incoming calls as a way of recording them. You can use this for future calls as a way of planning them. You know, the call date would just be in the future, and you might set yourself some reminders. And for a future call, the status would be not started. For a call that came in, you can already have it as finished. And then, of course, you have some sort of summary and detailed note. And from here, I'm going to jump over to the home page. We have various sections here which start with the word my tasks, my task delegated, and everyone's going to have a version of that if it starts with the word my. So my tasks does mean literally that. It's just the things that are on my plate. Other sections here on the home page may or may not appear depending on your permission level. So as a high-level person, I get the status board. And we have one status board for operations, for your ongoing jobs. We have another status board for your sales. When I open them up, you'll notice that there's some notes here. And these were entered under the job, including the tag for the status. And we have a set of tags for good, flagged, and alert. So if something's in red, then you probably have to take a look at it right away. So this is meant as your 30,000-foot view of how things are going across the company. We have another one for sales. This one is using a scheme for cold lead, medium lead, hot lead. I've seen some people use a scheme based on the phase of the project that they're in. So it could be where you're working on the quote or you're waiting on the quote. It's whatever you want. That is also configurable in the settings editor. So here's the section for my tasks. And again, these are all tasks that are assigned to me, whether I created them or whether someone else created them and assigned them to me. The next section is for tasks which I created and then delegated to someone else, so I can keep track of that. So we got a couple that are now running late that I would want to look into. The next section is again for administrators, and it looks across the entire company for all unfinished tasks. And it's looking out, it's gathering together a list of everything from everywhere in the system. If a task was recently completed, then we have a section here, tasks recently completed, 2 tasks, and they will stay here for 5 days after the time of completion. That way you don't have to look through the ongoing list of tasks and try and spot one, just thinking that if it's not there anymore, then it's completed. We explicitly tell you. We have a similar section for my calls. If I'm a team lead on a job, then I mentioned that you might have a list of invoices that you're going to approve, and this is that list for me. I also mentioned that we have an optional approval feature, and that is activated for this particular site. And here are hourly entries that I need to approve. In the real world, you would probably not have quite so long a list. And if I entered hours into the system and somebody rejected them, then the list would appear here. I could go edit them and resubmit them to the system. So then the team lead would see my resubmitted hours appearing here under the items for my approval. Next, we got a couple of sections just meant to help you keep track of what's on your plate. If you're the team lead, you'll want to pay special attention to those since you have a higher responsibility. And that's your list of jobs right there. And then we've got the jobs where you're a team member. So you probably don't have quite as much responsibility as you do when you're a team lead. When we're looking at contacts, I pointed out that you can mark somebody as sending business to you. And if you haven't spoken to them in a long time, then we call that being stale. And the system will generate this section by looking for your contacts that refer business to you. It looks at how long it's been since you last spoke to them. And then it generates this kind of a to-do list. And if you keep this list up to date, where these dates are all recent, then you will know that, that you haven't let anybody slip through the cracks. In the client profile, you can mark whether somebody is willing to act as a reference. And when you're going in on a sales call, you can use this section if somebody asks you for some references. And SMMware also helps you keep that first list up to date. This second one will tell you if you have left their client profile blank and you haven't said whether they're willing to act as a reference or not. So by keeping this list short or with 0 entries, then you'll know that the first list is fresh and up to date. This is a relatively new section for my invites, upcoming events, and we'll talk about events and invites shortly as we talk about the calendar. But if there are any invites where I have, for an upcoming event, I can keep track of whether I've said that I'm interested or not. I can change my status if I like. Here on the home page, there is a calendar, which is limited. It's only going to show events that I am personally a part of. I'm an attendee at these events, or I'm the main contact who's arranging it, like the team lead. I'll point out that if an event is tentative, it'll have a red border. And we also have a set of tags at the bottom that let you use the color to tell you something about those particular events. So this is a job. The tan ones are sales calls, and I will go into more details shortly when we get to the master calendar. So again, this is my schedule, and it's only going to show me things that I am personally connected to. If I go up to the main menu and look at the master calendar, this is where you do all of your actual planning. When we click on one of these events, we get a pop-up. It has additional information. It shows you who the workers are who are going to attend. If you're using the availability approach, then it'll have their shift times. So for instance, 10:30 to 3 p.m., 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. It will also have, if you use the address in the event's description, it will have a link to a map. This is also true on mobile devices. And what we're essentially doing here is handing you off to the mapping function, either on your computer or on a mobile device. And then they will take charge of giving you the turn-by-turn directions. Coming back here to our calendar, I'll go ahead and start a new event. I'm going to click on the date so that SMMware already knows which date I want. I'll say add new. There's an option where when you click on the date, it'll immediately start a new event. I personally keep that turned off because I seem to have a habit of clicking on dates kind of subconsciously, and then I'm winding up starting new events that I don't really want to. But if you don't have that, then you can go ahead and turn that on. So this is a new event. I'm going to say that it's related to a job, and then I pick which job. I'm going to put in a description. I'm going to use this link to insert the address. And this little square bracket, the word map and colon, and then ending with the other square bracket is a way of telling SMMware that this is going to be a map link. It's called a short code. I have a spot where I can indicate who the main contact is. Maybe a team lead. You might have somebody who handles the scheduling centrally. Maybe you want to use them. I can set a couple of reminders. I can use a custom color if I want to. A number of colors to choose from if I don't want to use one of the standard tags. Sometimes you skip notifications using this checkbox because you have made a very minor change and don't want to bother people. Here's the list of employees and when they're available. And SMMware has 3 different ways of managing who the attendees are for an event. The first one is called Direct. And it provides you with a simple checklist. And each of these 3 ways has an underlying way of thinking. For the direct approach, there's an assumption that you spoke to these people either on the phone or via email, or maybe on the car ride home from the last job. So you already know that they're going to work on this event, and you don't need SMMware to help you plan anything. So you just assign them, essentially. The second approach, you do want SMMware's help figuring things out. And we're going to use invites. We're going to set a date by which time people are supposed to respond. And we're going to set a team size. By the way, here's where you mark an event as being tentative. So if I use the team size of 3, there's different approaches to the invites. There's the first come, first serve approach. So if I say I want a team size of 3 and I invite 10 people, then the first 3 who respond are going to get a message saying that they're accepted as requesting assignment. And anybody after that is going to get a message saying, I'm sorry, the team is full. But if you don't want to use that approach, you can use a larger team size. So it's a guarantee that nobody gets turned away. And some of the approaches here can be multiple rounds of invites. So let's say that you want to have 4 people, and you have 4 people in mind, kind of your A team. And then one of them, you send out the invites, one of them responds back and says that they can't do it. So then you do a round B. You can add somebody else to the list. And then only the person who's affected gets their notification. So when you add a 5th person, because the 4th person said no, only that new person gets the notification. Going back to what is the default for this system, the availability approach. First of all, these early 2 systems, they are considered client-driven. You can think of them as client-driven because the first thing you do is talk to the client and see when they want the work done. And then it's up to you to kind of fill in the blanks in terms of who's going to do the work. The availability approach is more of an employee-driven approach. It's going to start off with the employees coming up to either the availability or an unavailability command, depending on how your system is configured. This one is set for unavailability. So people come here and they say when they cannot work. So this In this case, I, as a system administrator, am saying that I could not work Monday from 8 to 3. I can't work tomorrow from 11 until 8. Other employees have their own entries. Since I'm a sysadmin, I would be able to look at all of their entries, and anywhere, or if you're a regular admin, you would be able to see that as well. But again, this is where the information starts off in the system. This is where the employees say that they can or cannot work at given times. And that way, when you are planning your events, then you come here and you might see chunks missing if people cannot work at a given time. And I want to start assigning people. And this is our fanciest approach to scheduling, because I can have people arriving and leaving at different times. I can stretch these shift bars as needed. And then when I'm ready, I'm going to go ahead and save this event. And this was on the 26th. You can see that when we go back to the main calendar. Before we leave here, I'll point out this icon. And this indicates that we are connected to Google Calendar. And what that means in terms of integration is that SMMware will copy all of your events over to Google Calendar, to a single company calendar at Google, which you can then share with employees. But you still do all of your planning here in SMMware, because SMMware has all the information about the clients, about when the employees are available. So it's not, it's really kind of a one-way flow of information from SMMware to Google Calendars, because Google Calendar doesn't have the complete picture. And here we are back on the main calendar. Let's talk a little bit about these tags. These are completely configurable as well. And I've seen 3 major approaches to using these. For one is to distinguish between events that are part of a job and events that are part of sales. So in that case, we have job and sales tags in the green and the tan. Another approach that I've seen is people want to talk about, they want to be able to tell what kind of work is being done on a given day based on the color of the event. So in this case, we've got pack and unpack defined as tags in the system. And here's an example here in the purple and the green. So that way you can look at your calendar, and based on how much purple or how much green you're seeing, you can tell what's going on. And the third approach I've seen has to do with who the team lead is. In this case, we've got some tags defined. We've got Judy, Carmen, and Margot. And we can see that Margot's got an event here on the 22nd. We can see that Carmen has one here on the 19th. So that way you can use that kind of color approach and tell who's doing what. And one of the last things on this page to look at is the idea of planning using what we call availability summaries. I'm going to turn those on now. And I can see these new entries, and it tells you how many people have at least some time that day. So we've got a setting in SMMware where you can basically tell SMMware that as far as these entries are concerned, maybe you don't care if you only sign people in 4-hour chunks. You don't really care if somebody's only got 1 hour, and you tell SMMware, hey, don't show this person to me as being available unless they've got at least 4 hours. And there's a few different options for that limit. But again, this is a planning tool. You can click on it and get the details and see who's available when. And on this pop-up, you can see that, say, Karen was only available from 3 to 8 because she's working on something up until 3. And the same with Brian and John. So that helps you with your planning. And when I'm done with it, I can turn it off and go back to the regular view so as to kind of declutter things. From here, I'm just going to touch briefly on the integrations that we offer. I don't want to keep you past the 1 hour, and we spent some time talking about the pay levels, so I'm just going to be a little brief. When it comes to the integrations, we integrate with MailChimp, and that allows you to upload your contacts, your clients, to MailChimp, and it includes tags. And if you're not familiar with MailChimp, you can then send out mass emails based on templates that provide the look and feel. And these tags allow you to narrow down the list of recipients. Look at the clients here. And SMMware has tagged them as being current clients or past clients. And then you can use that information to send out your emails and narrow down the list. And it is possible for somebody to be simultaneously a past client and a current client. If you did a job for them 3 years ago and now you're doing a new job for them, then yeah, they are a current client as well as a past client. And they can even be a possible client as well, all at the same time. We also have tags for your contacts. And then the categories that you assign to them in SMMware become tags here in MailChimp. So real estate, finance, moving and storage, those are all tags that start off as categories in SMMware. And then here's one tag that is not a category from SMMware. This is refers business to you, and that will only be part of a record if you have that checkbox marked for that contact that they refer business to you. MailChimp also allows you to create these automations, these customer journeys. And these are email campaigns where you can set up, say, 10 emails and say you're going to send one a week. And you can have people added to this list at the end of a seminar, or maybe from the Contact Us page of your website, things like that. And that way you can kind of keep in touch with them over time and remind them that that you are interested, because we know that a successful sale is partially about timing and talking to somebody at the moment that they're ready to make their decision. We also integrate with QuickBooks, both online, QuickBooks Online and QuickBooks Desktop. You can copy over various entities from the low level to the top level. Starting off, the low level items would be associates, clients, and vendors. And then from there, the next step up would be your hours and your expenses. And then at the top level, you would copy over invoices if you like. And you'll see within SMMware, this little green icon indicates that something has already been copied over. And the QBO add button is going to appear in various places and allows you to copy information from QuickBooks or from SMMware to QuickBooks. We also have a YouTube channel for people who want to learn some more. We've got a variety of videos here. You can see there's a pretty good number of various topics. I'm coming here to our corporate site, talk a little bit about the plans that we offer. There are no annual plans, no commitments. It's just month to month. And the billing is based on, the various plans are based on how many active users you have in the system, starting with $45 a month for up to 10 active users. And for a given user, let's say you have somebody who is seasonal, you can mark them as not being active so that they don't count towards your total. And there's also no setup fees. And I like to mention that we have trainers. We have Brenda Alderdice and Liz Donovan. I think Brenda was going to be on today. Brenda, are you here? Maybe say hi in the chat. And we have the contact information here. So if you have questions about SMMware, you need help getting your system set up, these two folks are excellent at it, and I would highly recommend them. We also have our manuals online. And you can look at those even now. You don't have to be a subscriber to come here and learn more. You've got the administrative manual, a team lead manual, a team member manual, and some other supporting documents. And that pretty much, hey Brenda, good to see you here. And again, everybody, we highly recommend our trainers, Brenda and Liz. So that pretty much wraps up our presentation for the day. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to take them before we go. And if anybody has questions that come up later, You can always contact us, 240-285-4619. And you can use our Contact Us page. And we're always happy to talk to you and answer some questions. And thank you again for coming. We hope you have a great day. I'll go ahead and sign off now. Hey, Nicole, thank you. Hello, Joe from Pennsylvania. All right, everybody, have a great day.